Welcome back to what I guess we're calling the Free Outside podcast. But this episode is all about how to unlock your potential and to be way better than you currently are. No, just kidding. It's going to be about quitting. I just thought I'd run through some times I've quit things because we don't talk enough about quitting. I don't know. It's a lot easier to be like, ooh, David Goggins, push through everything. Even if your leg falls off, you should keep going. Well, I think there's some good times to quit. Even a year ago, I quit the Superior hiking trail because I just didn't want to be out there. It was a waste of time, and yeah, I wasn't going to get the record, not because I wasn't capable or on track. I actually was on track after 3 days, but it was like, why am I doing this if I hate what I'm doing? I was just watching my life tick away. Every step, every mile was like, well, there's beauty all around me. It is autumn in Minnesota. The trees have changed. It is beautiful out here. And I am just having a pity party for myself and not enjoying any part of the adventure. It was really a last minute adventure or FKT record attempt, really just born out of like, I need a change in my life. I was going through a breakup and all that stuff and was like, oh, I can just patch this with an FKT instead of looking myself in the mirror and coming up with better methods of moving forward. So, I just threw everything in my car. That'd be weird if it was just a car. If I went on the street and then I just jumped in that car and I just whipped on out to Duluth. But no, it was actually my car. That car has since been totaled. Truck hit me. I didn't hit the truck, I swear. I actually had to go to traffic court, and that was weird. Maybe that's a story for another day, or maybe it's a story for right now. I drove out to the start of the trail. I shopped, I think, just at like a Walmart right near the trailhead. Got everything I had, went. Even one of the few times I paid for a campsite because it was hard to find a dispersed spot where I wanted to be set up. And then I talked to the ranger where to park my car. I had to repackage all my stuff. And then that's when I realized, like, whoa, this trail starts like on the Wisconsin border and there's no like good parking for my car. So I have to basically hike 9 miles, what would be backwards on the trail to get to the start. And then I camped there and then started. So I realized that at like 9 p.m. and even to just set myself up for starting the next morning without adding bonus miles, I repackaged everything and hiked in the dark, camped, and then started the next day. It was destined for failure. And I mean, I maybe could have just forced myself through it, but it would have been this experience that contributed to my next adventures and experiences, just being like tainted with this like memory of FKTs sucking, and it takes so long to come back from them and stuff too. I can't imagine if it was completely born out of like, well, I just death marched for 4 days and then I got this record that I did for all the wrong reasons, only to just show myself that in the darkest dark, I should go and hike a trail. And I think that's really the problem that so many of us have is like, well, the Pacific Crest Trail was really awesome one time, so if I go back, I'm going to have the same enlightening experience. But really, we're never in the same spot as when we start something. So the story of that quitting adventure, I mean, it was just like everything fell apart. I obviously was not meant to be out there. And so the first day went fairly well. I mean, I just basically was eating Oreos all day because I didn't like anything else I brought. I had a terrible food strategy, but I got through, had a pretty good day, but was texting some friends like, man, I am just not, usually I can hit that switch and be right in the middle of it and just enjoying it. Like recently the John Muir Trail, by like hour 4, I was so immersed in moving forward and just having such a good time. But it was so different on the Superior hiking trail. Like the terrain oscillated and was pretty difficult. I couldn't really run like I wanted to. I was fit enough for an unsupported record, but I just didn't want to be out there for 5.5 plus days of just depending on myself when there were so many other things I could be doing with my time. Like my mind would just wander so much. My phone was dying because I was texting so many people, like trying to find inspiration from like externally versus within. So day 3, my pack had ripped, and I just used that as the excuse. And for like an hour or two, I was telling people like, oh yeah, I'm going to quit because my pack broke, when really it was like I wanted to quit the whole time from the moment I started. So it was a big moment of just accepting like, well, I was out here for the wrong reasons, and I did not want to be hiking this trail, and I just tried to force it to happen. I think that happened so many times, and the best decision I could have made was quitting. I was able to do a number of adventures and things in Death Valley. I went into the fall and had even lower lows once I got COVID and stuff, but I had this at least thing I drew on of, I quit after 3 days, and then I had 3 more days to explore. I went to the high point of Minnesota, got to really spend my time doing what I wanted versus this adventure, which was completely defined of point A to point B in under a record amount of time. And I didn't even want to finish hiking the Superior Hiking Trail, since the experience was like, it just wasn't going to paint that trail in a good light. And I think I'll definitely go back and do that, especially in the fall, because the colors were just so amazing. But it was a really good reflection of what goes into an FKT and what goes into any through hike or anything. Even in the past, I've quit in the middle of things, just personal projects and stuff. Like even here in Montana, there's this trail that I train on all the time, and I've shown up at the trailhead being like, oh, I'm going to go all the way to the summit, and maybe it's windy or something, but my mind is not into it. And just to like survive to fight another day, really that whole thought is, well, I can just leave now. I can go do something in town, but then I won't like spoil and taint this whole project with this air of like grinding it out and hating every step. And I think those low points are important to come, but you got to enter that with this air of you're really grateful and thankful to be out there. And the Superior Hiking Trail is one that I really didn't have it on. So quit, and I had a wonderful time. I changed backpacks to something bigger. I took like sweatpants, and I read a book the rest of the time and looked at all the amazing foliage changing, which underrated Duluth foliage, top notch. But yeah, that really is something I'm pretty positive we all need to accept more. Is, yeah, if there are a lot of things we should push through, and getting to push through numerous things has been really important for growth and just being able to, up the ante a little bit. Even on the Arizona Trail, just super gluing my foot closed and then continuing for like 5 more days was really good to show me like what I could physically overcome. But that mental side, it's not just a lull, it's you're just in this black hole that you're never going to get out of. Another time happened on Nolan's 14. I really wanted to go for the FKT. This would have been 2019. And I showed up and was fairly ready, but I don't know, I just wasn't in this headspace. I was just like passing through Colorado and like, I'm just going to cobble together this effort. I'm going to throw some stuff in a bag and just crush Nolan's 14. And things don't work that way when you get up to a certain level. I got up to Mount Massive and just was like having this like anxiety attacks fueled by having asthma issues. And once again, it was like, well, I don't think I can ever do it with asthma issues. And it's like, well, I didn't enter this thing prepared or scouted or anything. Like I had the physical tools and the know-how and the knowledge of where everything went and how I needed to execute this plan to set an FKT on Nolan's 14, but I didn't go into it prepared to execute a plan. I basically was like, oh, I'm just going to do it because it's convenient and I'm already here and I have a ride to the trailhead, because this was during the 2 years I didn't even own a car. And that really, it was a good lesson where I made it over Mount Massive, got control of my asthma, and then pushed up over Mount Elbert, tallest one in Colorado. Got over that one too. And then it was like, what am I doing out here? So I don't think I even did another peak. I just walked down into Twin Lakes and like had a beer with a friend, and then got a ride back to Denver, because it was just like, what am I doing out here? I have no business doing this. I did not mentally prepare. I went into this on just like a whim. Whereas like one of the longer ones I planned was the Arizona Trail. I had like this whole split circumstance of like either going for the Barkley Marathons if I get in, or I'm going for the Arizona Trail record. And I was on the wait list, so I trained in Tahoe for the Arizona Trail, had a plan, even had mailed stuff to be able to resupply along the way. So I'd like put in effort, time, and planning, whereas, you know, like the Superior Hiking Trail, unsupported. Oh, I'll just throw everything I need in a pack. Or Nolan's 14, throw everything I need in the pack, shop the exact same day. And I just don't think adventures can work like that, where your mindset's going to follow your preparation. I think it's really got to be going into something with that like concerted effort, and you have to consider what actual hardships and things are going to come along. Like asthma has been a growing concern or issue, but have a few tools to deal with it, and it should never knock me off an attempt or anything. But I let something like that just crumble the really fragile mindset that I went into an adventure like. So I think that there's such an importance in knowing that time to quit and when not to. I think one time I think numerous times it's been this lesson along the way. Even this summer in Montana, I was doing this Ridgeline link up that was like 37 miles, 38 miles round trip, and started out really well. I just was like, oh, I'll wake up early, and if I feel like it, I'll go for it. And so I felt like it. I started running. I ran the Foothills Trail, which gained like 7,000 feet or something, up to got halfway through the thing pretty easily, but the second half had no water, and so that was just like a physical ailment that was like the reason to quit. And even with 7 miles left, I was out of water, my hands were cramping, and I just knew like this is the sign of something really bad happening, like in the future or just in the coming hours if I don't take care of myself here. I'd been in that situation before. I did the exact same, about half the route with no water before, and I didn't know that there was no water on the entire route, hence the preparation. I made it through that, but at a mile from the end, I was just like laying in a pool of my own vomit, shaking uncontrollably, and having people ask if they wanted me to if I wanted them to call an ambulance. So I finished that one, but that was a good lesson of like, well, this is the sign of dehydration, and this is how serious it can be. Whereas like maybe if that was another hour, I probably would have been in the hospital. And on that same ridge link up, when I noticed those signs, I could see the final peak, and I only had, 2 hours left, but with no water and already some massive signs of dehydration, and already having covered like 13,000 feet and 33 miles or 32 miles. It's like, I can't do this. So the plan was scrapped immediately, and it was just this decision of I need to get off this ridge for my own well-being. So I immediately dropped down on the other side, laid in a creek for like an hour, lowered my body temperature, drank a lot, and then walked out to a highway and hitchhiked back to my car, which it was car to car, but with a ride in between. So I think the importance of quitting is really this thing that's not talked about enough. Like if you are going into an adventure, like already thinking about reasons or things that are going to knock you off, or not having a good why or motivation, of you should be able to look into the mirror and just be like, well, this is exactly why I want to do this. And that's so important with every adventure, that usually going into something, I'll even write down a few reasons or things I want to do. Like most recently, the John Muir Trail, the why behind that was really cemented. It was my first through hike, the Pacific Crest Trail. I'd done it all in the snow. I'd scouted the John Muir Trail. It'd been like a project for years, and I just wanted to go back there and almost like book in this experience in the Sierra Nevada mountains. Excuse me, another burp. 2 for 2 on podcast. 2 burps, 2 situations. And so the John Muir Trail record, like my why was so defined. It was a trail that scared me. I was excited to see if I could do it, and also to experience the same environment southbound and relive the experiences that really got me hooked on wilderness and like through hiking and backpacking and stuff just by being out there. So I got to see everything in reverse. I'd never gone that direction. I've been just so inspired by like Joe McConaughey had set the record like 4 weeks before, and the why was just so cemented of there's this two-pronged attack of, it's not just to get a record or the fastest time. It was more so like, I've never really done a lot in the third night of sleep deprivation. It was like, that's going to be interesting to figure out. But it was also, I had this massive why of, I get to go relive and get the nostalgia of all these memories. And they were just so plentiful the entire time. The last time I'd been out on that entire trail was with my friend John, trail name Airborne. And it was really cool to be back out there and just see the terrain in a different way, move over it in a different way, and just be inspired by every step from within versus like, ooh, I can't wait to get my name on a website or do something important. And I think that's something that has really defined a success and failure in so many different aspects. Like even the Barkley Marathon. So I got in 2020 and then it was canceled, but it was moved. My entry was moved to 2021, and I'd built up so much training and had a massive amount of vert miles going into 2020. Like around March, I was about the fittest I've ever been. And then it was abruptly canceled, and I ended up, as I mentioned, working at a grocery store, but it was basically impossible to go back to zero and just re-simulate the same working out. And I showed up, it's like not a ton less prepared, but the fire was sort of not there because I'd had this very real experience of really training and being fit for some adventure, and then it immediately was taken away. So it was really hard to adopt that mindset. I went in and did have a pretty positive experience and ability to go for it, but that fire is just so hard to relight. And if it like an adventure like Nolan's 14, which I don't know if you guys know, it's 14 different 14,000 foot peaks, and just being able to climb all of those. I'd done it once before, but not the FKT. Relighting that fire and knowing that you have to do something so hard again is really difficult. And the same thing was absent on the Superior hiking trail. And even it wasn't the most inspiring FKT route or just route out here that I was trying on the Ridge Link up, but the why in the fire was simply like to have one more FKT to my name, which is so contra to what the whole ethos of FKTs and the outdoors and moving through them efficiently is about, and what I've kind of been able to hold on to and grow throughout my career. Wow, scary. I can't believe I say career after I already quit one. But I think that is the most important thing. Even going back to my career, knowing that how unhappy I was and being so depressed, but still, financially being able to look at things like browse houses in Denver and a new car and things like that. Like I could have had those things, but it was just going to fill this empty void where the why was, it was because I was supposed to, not exactly because there was any reason to do that for personal fulfillment or achieving a goal or something. And I know that's a goal for so many people, but it was so obvious that I was moving down a path that most of my life was going to be defined by, and I didn't want to go down that path. It's exactly the same as starting the Pacific Crest Trail in 2011 when I was in college. Like I knew of two different routes, two different careers. There was like, I could be a teacher because my grandma was a teacher, or like a civil engineer because both my parents were civil engineers. I didn't really know any other careers. I thought like I always wanted to be like a professional NBA player, but I got a year and a half into college and was like, what am I doing? I need to quit, and quitting doesn't mean you can't come back and do it. And I did go back and finish college and get a degree, but it was very, very defined as like, I don't like this path I'm on. What am I going to change? Like I can either just go through the motions and keep doing this, or I need to change something. And I think that's one of the most important things that I want to echo to the world is like, it's so healthy to quit, especially when it's not inspiring. Like we only have so finite of a time that it's really, I don't know, chase the things that are inspiring. I don't know, like I'm sitting here staring into a microphone and talking about what's inspiring. And it's really something that I've only learned by the times where those lows really accentuate the highs, like without being able to be like, well, I wasn't ready. I didn't want to be out there for the Superior hiking trail or Nolan's 14. Then that is something I can draw on of like, well, now I know that feeling of when things suck and I don't want them to suck. Like I'm not out here because of me. I'm not out here because I gave up a career and a life just to be able to do this thing where I'm proving that I could be the fastest on this like man-made route that's super contrived anyways. So yeah, I'm a huge proponent of quitting. And this, I don't know. We'll see how the future goes, but it's so hard already to come back from like a success that even if it's a success that's full of just like emotional turmoil, which is how it often feels when you're grinding it out for like a workout or something, like running on a treadmill for an hour. It feels like emotional turmoil and torture and awful, that wanting to do that the next day, there's no chance. And that's how fulfilling an adventure where you just grind it out just to say you did, like, why would you want to do another adventure like that? And I think that's been a huge reason why I'm always looking for something new to do, like even just getting into trail running. My first 50K was such a tumultuous experience that I should definitely do one of these little podcast little things on that. But it was such a rough experience, which I made so many mistakes, but it was completely fulfilled in the end, because it was like, all I want to do is to prove to myself that I can do this. And the why behind that was like, I can be so much more than just hiking in the mountains or alone, because I just lack that social interaction and stuff. That really what it became was like a very average finish in time, but I just adopted talking to the other runners out there, or really embracing the community afterwards. Like, I didn't know anyone at the race, and I'm such an introvert. Weird, I'm doing a podcast. And I got to spend like, I don't know, 45 minutes or an hour just talking to other finishers after, who were super proud of their races. And it was like, okay, I can actually be proud of finishing this, because I ran a marathon when I was 19 and I didn't get around to running anything else until I was 2017. So like 27. So it was just like a big stretch in a different way. And the why really morphed along the way, but I didn't go into it with this idea of like, I'm going to win this race. It was more like, let's prove this to myself and just see what I go through out there. And I had this backbone of like, well, I can make it through 31 miles no matter what, no matter how slow. But there was this developing why on that versus going into something with the only why of notoriety or something. And I think that's been like just such a huge difference through everything. Even this past February, I was out on the Ozark Highlands Trail with the idea of going for a record on it. Like, I was going to through hike it one direction and then run it on the way back. And it just wasn't going to be. Like, it was so rainy. It was already hard to log like 30 plus miles a day while just through hiking it. I love the experience out there, but through hiking was what I wanted to do. I didn't want to be going for an FKT. I didn't want to turn around and run through that terrain. I hit 2 massive creeks and had to swim them. It was like, I am forcing an experience out here that I don't want to have. So I scrapped the idea of an FKT and ended up having one of the most unique experiences of hitchhiking experiences. Got to do my verbal exercises of hitchhiking all the way across Arkansas, which actually, now that I think about it, probably many people have done. But it was, I think all of those moments of whether it's quitting, or maybe we reframe that of, I didn't quit an FKT in Arkansas on the Ozark Highlands Trail. I just changed what my goals were. I experienced more of Arkansas or something. I still got in 200 plus miles out there, did the entire trail one way. I just didn't fulfill the plan, the goal, the thought of doing an FKT on the way back. And that's very similar to the Superior Hiking Trail of, I quit the attempt at an FKT, but I fulfilled the adventure and I still got to see way more stuff. Like, even just going and seeing this land of 10,000 lakes. I'd never been here. I had friends from Minnesota, but I'd never been to the state, and I just got to see a bunch of these lakes. I ran around a few of them. I got to car camp, and it was raining, so it was just much more pleasant experience. It wasn't a failure. It was just like changing the use of time and opportunity, because, why would I slog through 3 days when I could have like 3 fantastic days really driven by like what I wanted to do. Even I remember just going to like a diner for coffee and getting to like talk to locals in like northern Minnesota, which is one of those areas that not many people know anything about, and myself included. And it was just so unique to hear a different perspective on everything. And that's exactly how Arkansas was, of like this changing plans, or I call it quitting, and not being afraid to do that leads to a way better opportunity or something else. And I mean, I think that's very very set in stone of like, oh, we should all quit more. But I think it's this massive growth personally in all these endeavors, and whether it's like a weekend trip or something, like maybe you slow down, maybe your failure is not hitting the mileage you wanted or the time you wanted, or getting to do this exact route this year or something like that, or maybe you're not comfortable with the snow. That's fine time to quit. Like there's so much else to do, especially even just like snow conditions can be something so difficult. And a lot of like numerous times I've gone on a run and just like immediately quit because like I am not into this today. Why would I do something like this that I hate? There's such a difference between like growing and pushing and doing something hard versus doing something you hate. Like I think hate is such a strong word, but it does apply to so many things where you're like out there just endlessly suffering. And if that's not the experience you're out to have, I mean, why have it if you can morph that into something different, or even go home and watch Netflix? I think there's such a lesson to be learned about this quitting mentality. And it's like, if you look at your friend, like I have many friends who do many incredible things. I could try some of those, but I don't think I'm going to find that enjoyment or love of the same thing. Like climbing, I've tried it and stuff, and it's just like I don't have that passion to just project a single boulder or a route like the same as that. So I completely endorse the quitting mentality, but that's only driven by the things that you fulfill. Should be going into it with this why and reason behind it, and success or failure then is not dictated by like getting a record or finishing a trail. It's dictated by like fulfilling this why of why you went out there versus like an external view to the other viewers who are like, wow, he just did that time in that, or he was way slower than we thought. And that shouldn't really matter if the goal is to push yourself on an Arizona trail record or a John Muir trail record. I mean, in many ways, I had a goal of under 3 days for the John Muir trail. I didn't get it. I got the record. So in some sense, is that failure personally? No, I think the only success there, the main success, was like showing up and finishing it and getting to experience all those little metrics along the way that I really wanted to do, like hike the trail southbound, feel this nostalgia around like Virginia Lake over Forester, to like face the demons of the third night. Like these were all little metrics and things that I was really excited to experience for the first time. And at the end of it, it was like, oh, I hope I can hit this time of arbitrary time to myself of 3 days. Cause it'd be like really sick to see a FKT on the John Muir trail under 3 days, but that didn't happen. I still got the FKT, but that doesn't lead to success or failure in any way. It was more so like moving efficiently and learning so much in this growth, like personally, versus actually getting an FKT by 13 minutes. I mean, I finished like covered in pee because I had to push so hard. It was like not the, it was more like of the stories along the way than the actual like last 2 mile push. I just remember like between Forester Pass and Mount Whitney, I'm just like laying on the ground and struggling because the whole ground seems to like bounce in my mind and I can't even keep footing. But being able to get up because I'm so driven to like, I got to get to the top of Mount Whitney. I also think I can make it to Sunset. I'd failed at making it to Sunset. I failed. Wow, excuse me. That's editors will take that out in post. Just kidding. We got none. But in 2011, I tried to make it to the top of Mount Whitney for sunrise, and I'd failed. Like me and a couple other people, we just couldn't find the trail because it was covered in snow. Our headlamps sucked and a whole story. But this time that became like a micro goal, like a seeable and like a noticeable way to achieve something. And then that might lead to setting the FKT. And so that's how it like broke into what's my next why. It's like, well, getting back to this nostalgia of climbing it in the dark, but doing it right this time. And it was like such a cool thing because 11 years later got to like fulfill this sunrise on Mount Whitney. That was one of the most beautiful things ever. And that turned into the motivation versus like the actual time. And then when I'm going down Whitney Portal, it really jumped into like, I'm just going to give it my best shot. I don't even know this portion of the trail, but it was like, I'm going to push and whatever happens. And that was so much more fulfilling than just having everything either success or failure based on one rudimentary time. Even in Costa Rica, when I wanted to set the FKT on the tallest mountain, Cerro Chiripa there, and Timothy Olson, an ultra runner, had it, and I went out the first day and I gave it everything I had. I like ran up the entire thing. It's like 26 miles with like 10,000 feet of gain round trip. Ran up it, got to the top, and like was redlining, heaving, just dying. I couldn't even like collect myself. So I took like 2 minutes at the top, and then I like tried to run down and ran as fast as I could, and like time was ticking down, and my one goal had been setting this FKT. And when that time passed, I don't remember the exact time, like 6 hours and something. When that passed by, I could see the trailhead. And so I finished like 2 or 3 minutes late, and I wasn't sad about that. I was like extremely motivated. Like this was such a cool journey of pushing myself. And I learned so much about like pacing and individual like ways of conserving and both carrying things. I'd never really run with a running pack much before that. And so I went to Walmart, or went to like the local store, and bought like a fanny pack and a better water bottle. And I just was so set on solving problems at that time that I didn't lose. I learned. It was much like in when I was in elementary school, I was on in the chess club, and they always called it like win, learn, or draw. So you never like lost, but I did lose that. I didn't lose the FKT. I just didn't get it. So I went back 3 days later with this newfound learning and applied it, and was able to successfully get the FKT in way worse conditions. And this was like such a seminal moment for the why. Wasn't just to go get the FKT. It was, I was like wondering how it would be to start at the trailhead of something that was so hard, and wonder if I mentally was strong enough to push through it again, whether I could get the FKT or not. Like I might have had 2 failures, but just this why of wanting to know, like, if I could actually do the climb again, when, yeah, I'd just done it. I was still sore, and I canceled. I was going to run the Costa Rica marathon, and just decided, like, I think this will be way more, there'll be like way more growth, way more learning, way more experience of like going after the exact same thing again, just showing back up. It's like getting back on the horse or something. If you fall off, like, I didn't fail, but I learned how I could do this better. So why don't I put this into action and go do it again? And that's basically the stepping stone of everything, whether it's that failure or moving forward. Like I finished my first time on the ridgeline out here in Montana, the Bridger Ridge, but I didn't have any water, and I was dehydrated, and everything fell apart. I finished. Was that like a success? I don't really think so. I learned about the signs of dehydration and how important and scary it can be. But I was able to take that into this next adventure, which was like 2 years later, and know all these signs, and I used it to make the smart decision and quit. So it was way more about the growth and the learning, the lessons along the way, and what works and what doesn't work, and then applying that into what works for a mindset, the gear, or even just knowing like, oh, I've been on the Superior hiking trail now, and I know when I wasn't invested into it, and I saved 3 days of my life. Like I got that time back to use however I wanted. And I think that's really the power of quitting. Is it's not quitting when it's hard, it's quitting when that's not how you want to spend your time. And there's a huge difference in that. It's even just like running a hard 10K or something. It could be easy and a lot easier to quit, but that's ultimately how you wanted to spend your time. So it's pushing through that as well. And I think the really big lesson here, which I'm still learning, is knowing when to quit and when to save those hours of your life and days to do something that you enjoy more. So, another podcast in the books, I guess. Hopefully this one's good. I have no idea.
Stay elite, my friends.